I have 3 questions for you today. 1, does your restaurant's training program only come in one language? 2, is your restaurant training program out of date? And 3, are you paying for an LMS that has way too many bells and whistles that you're not currently using? If you are shaking your head yes to any or all of these questions, we're about to blow your mind. Today, I'm going to introduce you to Rachael Nemeth and her company, Opus. Opus is going to revolutionize the way that you think about and execute training on a daily basis in your restaurant. Rachael Nemeth is the CEO and co-founder of Opus. She is a multifaceted leader in the restaurant tech space. With a career spanning several decades, she has made an impact not only as a business professional, but also as a public speaker and an educator. Opus revolutionizes learning and engagement for the deskless workforce in the restaurant industry. Her journey features work at renowned establishments like Danny Meyer's Union Square Hospitality Group, Baked, and Hot Bread Kitchen. In this episode, Rachael and I will discuss how Opus is different from an LMS, how easy it is to implement your own training program into Opus or create a new one, and the accessibility that Opus provides to your entire restaurant team, which is available in over 100 languages. Looking forward to bringing you this episode today. Welcome to the No Hesitations podcast, the show where restaurant leaders learn tools, tactics, and habits from the world's greatest operators. I am your host, Kristen Marvin, with Solutions by Kristen. I've spent the last 2 decades in the restaurant industry and now partner with restaurant leaders to help them overcome burnout, increase retention, reignite their passion, and drive successful businesses. I also work directly with restaurant leaders through one-on-one coaching and group workshops to help them identify their blind spots, build their confidence, and overcome challenges in their business. If you're curious about learning more, visit my website at kristenmarvin.com/contact to book a 15-minute goal planning session. This podcast is sponsored by Schedulefly. Schedulefly provides a simple, web-based and app-based restaurant employee scheduling software backed by legendary customer service. If you are using pen, paper, Excel, or fancy scheduling software with tons of bells and whistles that you don't use, Schedulefly is perfect for your business. When I was a regional manager handling 7 locations, Schedulefly was our go-to for scheduling. It's hands down the easiest platform that I've ever worked with. And their employee scheduling tool is awesome for shooting out mass messages about crucial restaurant updates. Visit schedulefly.com and mention the No Hesitations podcast to learn more and get 10% off. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, Rachael. Thank you so much for being here. Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Pleasure to have you on the show today. I am so excited to share your story and your company with our listeners today. I think what you're doing is so innovative and so different, but it's a really incredible resource. And I've just learned of you and Opus just a couple weeks ago. And as soon as we got off the phone, I was like, we've got to get her on the show. This is just absolutely incredible. So I'm excited that you reached out to me about being on the show, which is amazing. So super excited. We've got a cool connection with our love for hospitality and a little bit of Kansas City background. So a lot to build on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you share a little bit about your hospitality background, and then we can kind of get into your company a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Opus is designed, it's a training platform that's designed to fit into the flow of work, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But the only way that I was able to really craft a solution and build a business to solve that problem, that training problem, was because I spent 13 years in the hospitality industry. So my background is not in tech. My background is in restaurants, mostly on the operations side. Even before I was working in restaurants, I was surrounded by restaurants. My mom is in the food industry still. My grandfather owned restaurant in Kansas City, one of the first kind of QSR chains actually in the early 60s, called Don's World of Beef. It was a competitor with Arby's.
Awesome.
Arby's won, but
Oh,
still fought the good fight. Um, and so when I entered the industry, it was kind of a means to just pay off college loans. I knew how to do it, but I think as many of people listening have similar stories, I was good at it, and I knew it so well that it ended up being a career of mine for many, many years. Later on in life, after working in restaurants and baking and bakery manufacturing facilities, I landed at Union Square Hospitality Group, which was my, I guess, final restaurant job before I took the leap and started a company.
nice. And what was the moment where you decided that you wanted to start your own thing?
That's a great question. I think the moment, actually, I know the exact moment. There were like a couple of moments, but I had already had this idea to teach English as a second language in restaurants. That was actually my first company before Opus. Um, I had seen this pervasive issue where, 33% of Americans don't speak English as their first language, um, and are in the working world and are unable to gain economic access to more economic opportunity, just because they don't speak English and don't have time to go to brick and mortar classrooms. So the origin story there, and the kind of kickoff point for me to just even start solving this broader training problem was through ESL Works. When I got a call, I had actually left the industry at that point to teach ESL, to teach English as a second language. I thought that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
Not 2 weeks into that job, I got a call from the executive chef of Gramercy Tavern, Mike Anthony, and he said, "Hey, I heard about you through a friend. I hear that you worked in restaurants and that you teach English." And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Do you want to come teach English at Gramercy Tavern?" And I
Wow.
was like, "Yeah." And I literally filed for the LLC the same day. It just made total sense. So I actually give full credit to helping me take the leap to Mike. The story behind Opus is a much longer story, but that was really when I took the first leap into solving this problem and building a business.
I love that. I've absolutely had the pleasure of dining in Gramercy on my husband and I years ago on one of our trips to New York, and it's just such a magical place. I just I really resonate with what you're saying about this pain point of not being able to offer training to people that speak other languages besides English. I in my 20 years in the industry, so often, I was building training manuals from scratch, right? And we'd use paper and the binders, and I know a lot of that is still out there today. And people would, the team would often come to me and say, especially as I started working for larger companies, and say, "When are we going to have training available in Spanish?" And the answer was always, and this just completely breaks my heart, that it's too daunting and it's too big of a task and we can't make it happen. And it was so difficult because in some of the locations, it was 50% of the staff, and it was really unfair to ask our operators to try to piecemeal something together in a broken language that they didn't understand, and it just was not the same experience for everybody. And it's not fair. So kudos to you. And we'll talk a little bit more about, Opus and really what makes you different. But when you told me that your training platform is available in over 100 languages, my jaw just dropped. So let's talk a little bit more about the moment where, ESL was created, and then something pivotal happened there that you kind of shared, and then you transitioned to Opus.
Yeah. So, so at that point, ESL, I had started this business. This was, by the way, over 10 years ago. So I started a services business that delivered English as a second language in restaurants. For anyone listening, you know exactly what this problem is. I don't have to describe it to you. And restaurants needed it. They were desperate. They couldn't communicate with their teams. They wanted to promote people. They couldn't. And so investing in them, one class a week where I could go in and leave without a trace was a real blessing for a lot of businesses. That was an early proof of concept with just me. It grew into basically a league of teachers that I hired who delivered this program. I basically was running a logistics business, like shipping teachers around New York City to teach English classes at 5 a.m.
Wow.
and between shifts. A couple of years into that business, we started getting requests from our customers for something that could be a little bit more flexible. So customers were saying, listen, like, can you do 6 classes a week? Can you come in twice a day? And I was like, listen, sure, I can hire more teachers, but you won't be able to afford it. Like, it's just not scalable.
Mm-hmm.
The problem was that even if we were making the most accessible on-site training possible, it still was inaccessible to the kind of daily life of a restaurant worker who has shift changes and second jobs and kids and commutes. So if you're doing something between shifts change, you just can't accommodate all of that. So fast forward a couple of years, we prototyped a solution that delivered English language training to employee cell phones. That's the real origin to the technology we built today. Now, I will also say this. If there's anything to remember about this story, it's that it's a completely different technology. Like, we sunsetted all of that, but it was the inspiration for solving the access problem.
Mm-hmm.
Accessibility is so important, and it goes well beyond the basics of needing to offer training in 100 languages, which seems so table stakes. But to your point, like, it's a hard problem to solve manually, let alone technologically. We do that by, we built technology that automatically translates 100% of your training for you. The UI and the UX are translated as well, and employees can actually choose the language they prefer to train in, which means that...
Sorry, Rachel, just to interrupt. What does UI and UX mean?
User interface or user experience.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Which means that if you even have one employee, which we would see all the time, if you have one employee that speaks Turkish or Mandarin, you can support that person and you can invest in them, and you can build this equitable environment where everyone's learning the same thing. And of course, the big win is that your whole business is consistent, the brand's consistent, the experience is consistent.
Yeah. So
fast forward to March 2020, ESL Works, the digital version, was moving, and we were doing well, and restaurants shut down. I called all of our customers and I said, listen, like, ESL Works is dead. At that point, remember, no one thought restaurants were going to come back. Like, we thought restaurants were gone. It was a really, the amount of people I talked to, including myself, who would cry every night thinking, like, this industry is destroyed. So when I was talking to customers, I was like, I know you don't need ESL right now. It's not your biggest concern. How can we help? And they said, well, actually, we can't reach our people. And you can. You have their phone numbers. In their HR system, whatever that may be, these legacy HR systems don't capture phone numbers oftentimes, or they're out of date, or it's hard to keep updated.
That's crazy.
And it's kind of tragic, but truthfully, like, the blanket problem of every system that touches your frontline team is it requires an email and a password for them to get in.
Yep.
Which is inaccessible to the majority of working Americans. Most folks don't have an active working email.
That's such a good point. I remember one of the companies I worked with, we were trying to implement our LMS, and it was so robust, and there were so many things, and we would sit down one-on-one with each of our employees and create email addresses for them, and it was just such a nightmare.
You're not alone. We hear this all the time. the amount of time that frontline managers are spending creating email addresses or using a universal email address, which is like very chaotic and scary from a security standpoint,
Right.
resetting passwords for, countless systems, not just HR systems, is highly inefficient, highly insecure. And so in that moment, March 2020, really the problem that businesses needed to solve again was access. It's like we just need to reach our people and tell them what's going on and give them a sense of like, hey, restaurants aren't shut down. We're doing delivery. Here's like what you need to know. So we pivoted the entire business. I called an investor, Dan Turan, for help. And I was like, listen, like, I have no idea what's going to happen, but I have an idea to at least help our customers. Can you send some engineers my way? I need a lot of people to get this up and running. The idea was that we could use the existing platform to help deliver free COVID safety training to any business in America that needed it. That safety training would be delivered directly to an employee's smartphone over text message. And we would do it as a public initiative, so it would be entirely free. At that point, it was like, let's just go down in flames. If we're going to do this, let's do it in the best way possible
Wow.
and help as many people as we can. In a world where like people didn't even know how to wash their hands. So we thought, let's do the basics. So Stop COVID was born, and we grew from 0 to 20,000 users in a couple of weeks. And that was all the validation that I needed to know that what we were doing was really important
That's
and
incredible.
extended well beyond COVID safety.
Yeah. Wow. That's just such a touching story. I mean, your service and your hospitality is just really coming into play there, right? I mean, that's for you to have that mindset during that time of, I love that attitude of just let's go down in flames and to react that quickly and have investors that had your back, is just super important. That's incredible.
Yeah. It was and it came at a time when I think everyone wanted to help. Everyone wanted to find a way to support whoever they could, whether it was, checking in on your neighbor or what have you. And in our case, we just had tools that could help already. So we had a leg up by already having access to this problem that we had been thinking about for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to accelerate it because the problem it blew up in everyone's faces.
Yeah.
So that's not necessarily when Opus was born, but it was really like the foundation for Opus, which blossomed a few months later when things started to kind of settle in and lockdown lifted, things like that.
Yeah. So let's deep dive into Opus here. I want to know, I was playing around with the app yesterday and just love the
Awesome.
the accessibility of it, the how easy it is. I love some of the lessons that you were teaching the managers in there on how to schedule training for their employees. So give the listeners here just kind of a general overview of what Opus is doing, and then we can dig into some of the logistics of it.
Yeah. So high level, like I was mentioning earlier, Opus is a training platform that's designed to fit into the flow of work. What we'll always tell people is we're actually not making a promise here that we are going to digitize 100% of your training. If that's what you want, go find someone else. Talk to one of the 1,700 legacy systems. That's fine. But what we're really trying to do is marry the on-site training that has to happen in restaurants for your back of house team, for your front of house team, because we are learning physical skills, and blend that with a training companion that can reinforce those skills. So with a blended learning experience, Opus can achieve much higher knowledge retention rates and a much faster adoption rate because we're delivering everything to employee phones via a mobile app. So we're not on text message. We're not on desktop. We're none of that. They download an app at about 12 seconds. It's the average download time from literally like putting in your name and phone number and getting into the app. It's lightning fast. At that point, an employee is getting a personalized curriculum that's based on their location and their role, sometimes even their region. So everything that they're seeing is only relevant to the thing that they need to know at that point in their job, which is really important. A lot of what the status quo is right now is you're being handed a big fat paper packet and you're like, where do I start?
Mm-hmm.
Or you're being handed a legacy system with a big fat library and you're like, where do I start?
Yeah.
And this tells you exactly where to start and what to focus on. And then it says, hey, Kristen, go back to work. It's time to do this thing and validate what you just learned.
Mm-hmm.
So we're encouraging employees to get away from the screen and use Opus as a coach that can help guide them through their first 90 days, all the way up to, day 9,000 on various topics.
And I love this. I've got an episode coming up here shortly about the 90-day transition and how crucial it is to success. And you know that from an operational standpoint. But we also know from the learning aspect, right? If employees can see something and read something and then immediately go and be hands-on and start applying that knowledge, right? The retention rates go up 60 to 70%, right? Versus just reading something and then not applying the skills. Hey there, listeners. Before we dive back into today's episode, I want to take a moment to address something many of us can relate to: burnout. We live in a fast-paced world, and sometimes it feels like we're constantly running on empty. If you're nodding your head right now, feeling the weight of burnout on your shoulders, I want you to know that you're not alone. Recognizing the need for change is the first step towards a healthier, more balanced life. So, if you're ready to make a change, head over to my website at kristenmarvin.com/contact and schedule a 15-minute discovery call. This call is an opportunity for us to connect, chat about your unique situation, and see if there's any way that I can support you on your journey to a more balanced and energized life. Let's work together to design a lifestyle that brings you joy, purpose, and renewed energy. Don't let burnout hold you back. Empower yourself to thrive. Now let's get back to the show. Thanks for being here, and I look forward to connecting with you soon. So you said earlier that you can take current training manuals and build them into the platform, right? Are you also working with companies to create training programs from scratch?
So Opus is not a services business. So we built technology, though, that helps you do that 500 times faster than you would ordinarily. And I'm not kidding when I say that. Like, we leverage AI to help you take existing manuals that you have, which, by the way, we all have them. Yeah. A lot of people will say, we don't have any training. And we're like, all right, well, do you have an employee handbook? Yeah. Do you have recipes? Yeah. Do you have SOPs? Yeah. You have job aids? Yeah. That's training.
They're all soaked in coffee and they're behind the bar and they're sticky, but they're there.
And that's fine. and people will say, well, it's outdated. And I'll say, yeah, because it's paper. That's fine. Like, I can help you with versioning once it's digital, but you have something.
Yeah.
We're leveraging AI to help you move that it's all lives digitally somewhere into the platform. It will transform it into modularized, interactive micro training. So it's not just going to live there as a static document. It actually becomes an interactive experience for your team. Yes, we can hold it as a resource too, of course. But like, how do you make sure that your employee actually understands the uniform policy? Well, they have to train on it. Yeah. How do you quiz them on a scenario for how to deal with angry guests? Well, you shouldn't just read the policy about de-escalation. You should run through moments where you can think about, okay, well, this is what happens when it's a regular who gets mad or what have you. So that content creation experience was critical to how we thought about constructing the platform. Mm-hmm. We knew that we couldn't just be like all of these legacy solutions because they're solving kind of one problem, which is how do you just get things digitally accessible to your team? We had to solve this deeper problem, which is, to your point, how do I make sure my team remembers these things and takes them back to work and then feels really good and comes back the next day?
Yeah.
And then transfers that energy to our guests so that our guests come back the next day. And so the content building experience is so fast because we've built the technology that basically has helped restaurants avoid adding headcount in order to create training, which traditionally has kind of been the case.
I love when I was in the app that you guys were being proactive with understanding the pain point that some employees may not have their cell phone. And so the restaurant can access this training from a tablet, which is really great.
Yeah.
And I love that the modules are broken up into courses that are just 3 to 5 minutes, because I think I was able to quickly retain the information, right? And then move on. I want to talk about the elephant in the room, because the skeptical operator is coming out in me, right? And when I was in restaurants, I didn't want to see an employee's cell phone. I didn't want it on the floor. It was a battle I had to have with some of the companies that I worked with, right? So talk about the best way that this can be implemented. Are the employees to be in the office or in the back and doing their learning? How does this work?
So employees will use their personal device in order to learn. There is a few ways that they can do it as far as like best practices, which I'll talk about in a minute. But let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is everybody or some people will say, I don't want my employees using their phone. Well, let me break the news to you. Your team is already using their phone. I don't care what your policy is. They're checking their schedule, they're answering emails, they're responding to text messages from their managers, they're checking their pay stub, they are using any sort of communication to do a shift swap. We are in a generation that requires that we have phones in order to function at work. So whatever the policy may be, largely what we're seeing is that the policies are changing to say, like, listen, we know that you're going to have your phone in your back pocket. I also have seen, when I worked in restaurants, same problem. I was, when I was on the HR side, but I still remember a lot of sous chefs would walk into the office and be like, listen, but, Joey's mom's sick. Like, he needs his phone on him. Yeah. No one's going to call the office. Like, gone are the days of people calling the office to ask for Joey. Like, you have your phone to make sure that family's okay. And, it's almost a service to your team to allow them to do that and trust them. So the reality is that employees have their phones. It's really just a question of how you regulate that to ensure that they're using them properly. I still see like police officers pull out their phone to give someone directions. I see like cashiers pull out their phone to be like, helping a customer pull up a map to show them where to go. So like these things are happening. The way that you can insert Opus into the daily life and the daily work life of an employee is quite simple. Our recommendation is, listen, like it's micro training. It's 5 minutes a shift. I think from a pedagogical standpoint, if you and I were to nerd out about the training piece of it, the trainer in me says, relegate it to the start of shift. They should clock in, do their 5 minutes, and get to work so that they're using that knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. Like they should apply it immediately. If that's impractical, have them do it before or after family meal, or even, heck, do it at the end of their shift as reinforcement training. One of the best tips we have is, why is everyone quizzing at the end of a workday? Quiz at the start of the day so that people can sleep and they can absorb the information, and you're really quizzing them and they're not cramming.
Yeah.
Which is what happens a lot, is like we're building these cultures where people are saying, well, what's most important is 100% accuracy. I'm like, how do you know that you're actually achieving 100% accuracy?
Yeah.
So there's tactics to microtraining that are aligned with these operations. And a lot of it comes down to not having to change employee schedules, thank goodness. not having to pull them into a classroom or an office, but just making it a part of the training culture, where you're clocking in, in the back office, and then you pull out your phone and you do the work.
I love that. Who's the ideal client? Who is Opus perfect for?
Well, we love restaurants. We specifically serve the hospitality industry. From a size perspective, I think that's really important. Not everyone's ready for Opus. And we're really honest with people about that. When you're smaller, we have small plans that can get businesses started for as low as like $74 a month. And if you just need it for like onboarding for a couple of locations, you can get that moving. If you're a growing business, which we see more and more, businesses like Kevin Hart's Heart House, Westville here in New York, it's really important to have a full, robust system, but something that can kind of grow and bend and move with you. So we like to work with restaurants that have more than 3 locations, but maybe less than 100. That's really kind of our ideal spot, because that's where we see most businesses saying, dang, I really need something that can help me scale at this point, and I can't do it with a paper packet.
Yeah, and I love
like the small but growing is really where we love to play.
Yeah, I love, I was having a conversation with one of your teammates this week, and they were showing me, or really telling me that, if you've got a restaurant group with 10 different concepts, you can have that similarity of training, of the orientation, the story of, and the history of the owners, the story of the company, and then still have every single restaurant be its own, right? And then just easily program that out. And then, I was asking too, once everything is built, then the training platform really goes in the hands of the owners, right? And then they can easily make updates and tweaks to the system.
Versioning is another big problem here. Is I was just having this conversation this morning with a friend. Training is anything but stagnant in the hospitality industry. Bars and nightclubs, cruise ships, manufacturing, QSR, FSR, hospitality group, whoever you are, we have one of the most dynamic industries in the world. The guest experience is changing, menus are changing all the time, personnel are changing. And so being able to update what information you're getting to your team at any moment is critical. I've seen some restaurants that it will take them like 6 months to roll out an LTO, limited time offer, because they don't have the right tools to spin it up. When we started working with Ford's Garage down in Florida, big franchised FSR, they have lots of menu changes. And the VP of training there was saying, it used to take me 3 months to get a menu change up and running and training people on it. She said, I was able to spin this up in 2 days.
Wow.
And that is what helps me sleep at night, knowing that we're actually saving people time so that they can spend more time being strategists. Yeah. We all know what this feels like. Like, it's really hard to just keep up with the day-to-day. So if for the first time someone is able to adjust that training quickly and then get back to their data, their job, to me, it means a job well done.
Yeah. And I love that you guys are really thoughtful about the implementation of this and breaking it up, where you're training the admins first, then you're training the managers, and then it's going to the employee, to the frontline level. I love that aspect. Yeah. You've got all the bases covered.
So. Well, and that's a big piece that we focused on early on. So the first thing we spent about a year perfecting was the sign-up experience. We got that 12-second sign-up because we spent 365 days testing and perfecting it and getting it to where it was flawless. Employees scan a QR code, they choose their language, they enter their first, last, and phone, and they're in. That is so important. But once you hit that barrier, then you reach your next problem, which is, well, I've got 15 units and 15 GMs, and they're all exhausted. And they're turning over just as fast as my front line, and they have to manage so much, and I'm putting so much on them. And, I've been there too. They're working 70 hours a week. So how do we actually make it so that they're doing the work and training, but we're relieving the burden? So we're the only platform that has built a unique in-app experience just for managers. We're not asking managers to go to their computer to use Opus. They can use the mobile app, but it's a user experience that's just for them and helps them do a few things. They can check in on their team, they can send messages to their team, and they can assign a new training to their team. What that means is that they can hold their team accountable right in their pocket, which is hard to do, with paper checklists and Excel spreadsheets and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Where do you see the future of training and tech going?
I'm very optimistic about the future of training in tech. We've really just scratched the surface of what we can do to help make work lives easier and better. Our mission at Opus is to create a world where every frontline worker has a good job. It seems like such a far shot, because there's so much to do to help to create a world where people just like love their jobs. But I fundamentally believe that learning and development is at the cornerstone of what that can be. And so I think the future of training and the future of training technology is one where we're kind of beautifully braiding together better work cultures and better work lives together with learning and development that can actually help people gain access to more money and more economic opportunity, whether that's on the business level or the employee level. But right now, I think a lot of what's happening in the training and tech space is really just like kind of the beginning. It's like what we have to start with is like, how do we just get people to stop using paper packets? Because it's really time consuming and really expensive. Like Ziki Kitchen is spending 10 grand a year to translate, or was, not anymore with Opus, but they were spending 10 grand a year to translate their employee training. And when you can eliminate that cost and say, well, where could I use that cash now? I can implement an employee benefits program. I can give my team dental care. I can, buy that caviar for our guests that we wanted to eat. Like there's things that you can start to really dream up. There's a long-winded way of saying, I think, we're going to see a lot of massive changes happen in the next decade. I hope to be here 100 years from now where I can see how it's truly transformed the American economy.
I love this. I love what you're doing. Love the mission. Love Opus. I think there's an opportunity for a huge cultural change here, right? You talked about learning and development culture, but from an operator standpoint, I mean, you're opening the door to managers being able to interview anyone and create a more diverse team, right? And not have that pressure of, I don't know if I can communicate with this person, or how is my trainer going to communicate with this person? And you're creating a welcoming environment for everybody out of the gate. And it's just awesome. And like you said earlier, you're giving people the opportunity to constantly learn, constantly grow, which will help them stay in their position, be more motivated, more fulfilled, happier, and be able to work their way up the ranks, which is great for operators. It's great for guests. It's great for the employees. It's great for the business, right? All around. So kudos to you. You guys are amazing. So
thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. Everybody, please go check out Opus. Rachel, will you tell everybody where they can find you?
Sure. So you can learn more about Opus at www.opus.so. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. You can follow me on LinkedIn, and you can read all my rants about training. But yeah, opus.so is probably the fastest, quickest way.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to share this podcast with any leaders you know in the restaurant industry, and follow me on LinkedIn at Kristen-Marvin for more leadership tips. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.